Hello and welcome to Visions of Tomorrow, a series where I talk about and review science fiction movies of the past. Today I'm taking a look at On the Beach, released in 1959, directed by Stanley Kramer, and featuring the likes of Gregory Peck, Ava Gardner, Anthony Perkins, and Fred Astaire. This video will probably contain spoilers. If you haven't seen this movie, what are you waiting for? Just go and watch it. I'm not going anywhere. Alright, so let's dive in. We start inside the nuclear submarine USS Sawfish, captained by Commander Dwight Lionel Towers, played by Gregory Peck, heading to Melbourne, Australia, seemingly business as usual. It is not business as usual, however, as we soon find out that the entire northern hemisphere has been rendered uninhabitable by nuclear war. The last human survivors are gathered in Melbourne in the south of Australia as the radiation from the north slowly approaches. Everyone knows they only have a few months left, and everyone deals with the inevitable end in their own way, only sharing an overwhelming sense of sadness and malaise. Our sporting characters include Lieutenant Peter Holmes, played by Anthony Perkins, and his wife, Mary, played by Donna Anderson, both sporting some questionable Australian accents. Mary is in denial about the upcoming tragedy, while Peter tries to do what he can to ease her worry.
Well, as long as they all understand how I feel about those morbid discussions.
One of the couple's best friend is Moira Davidson, played by the stunning Ava Gardner, a Melbourne socialite who's decided to spend the apocalypse drinking nonstop and, as it's sort of implied, sleeping around. When Lieutenant Peter Holmes invites Commander Towers to a dinner party, Moira is assigned to the task of keeping company and distracting him from any thoughts of his dead wife and kids in the States. Other characters include Fred Astaire as the snarky English scientist Julian Osborne. He has clearly spent a lot of time thinking about the war or the stupidity that led to it, and he is not afraid to speak his mind.
The scientists signed petition after petition, please, but nobody listened. There was a choice. It was build the bombs and use them, or risk that the United States, the Soviet Union, and the rest of us would find some way to go on living.
There's also Admiral Bridie of the Australian Navy, the only remaining military authority in the world, and his trusted, possibly enamored secretary, Osgood. And lastly, all kinds of colorful background characters comprising of crewmen, party guests, barflies, race car enthusiasts, and other citizens of Melbourne that help flesh out this world. While stationed in Melbourne, Commander Towers and the USS Sawfish are at the disposal of the Australian Navy, who have a mission planned. The scientists have a new theory. Updated weather patterns in the northern hemisphere could slow down the spread of nuclear fallout, and so the southernmost parts of the globe could remain habitable. This is where the film sprinkles a little hope away, making you think, could our hero survive? Possibly. It's a slim kind of hope, but it's hope nonetheless. The American submarine is tasked with going to Point Barrow, Alaska, to measure the radiation levels in hope of finding evidence of this new hypothesis. That hope is only amplified when at the same time Australian Navy receives a radio transmission from San Diego in the US of something that sounds like Morse code. Perhaps there are survivors, civilians who don't know Morse code and are sending gibberish. Unlikely, but our characters are desperate for any possibility that there might be other survivors. This hope is, however, yanked away as quickly as it was given. At Point Barrow, the crew measures radiation levels that are much higher than expected.
It's high, isn't it? It's higher than it is in mid-Pacific. At least 30 points in the red.
The USS Sawfish stops at San Francisco next, only to find the city completely empty. One member of the crew, Swain, who is from San Francisco, leaves the submarine and decides to spend his last days in his hometown. Everyone understands. Next, the crew arrives at San Diego to investigate the strange Morse signal. This is where the film delivers the mother of gut punches. It's a Coca-Cola bottle, stuck on a cord, randomly pressing the button on the radio transmitter. The crew returns to Australia to spend their remaining days with their loved ones. Captain Towers spends most of his time with Moira. Julian Osborne finishes repairing his Ferrari race car and wins the Australian Grand Prix, barely evading death. Peter Holmes spends his time with his wife, who seems to have sunk further into manic denial and depression. Admiral Bridie has a last drink with his faithful secretary Osgood, wondering why she never married. Everyone is waiting for the inevitable end with as much dignity as they can afford to muster.
I feel so strange.
You remember the first time we ever met?
It was on the beach.
I thought you were everything I'd ever dreamed about. Everything I ever wanted.
I thought you were so underfed.
Every day after that, I went to the beach. But you were never there.
I had the flu. My mother made me stay at home.
I looked for you. I looked for you so.
Did you suffer horribly?
Oh, Mary, you'll never know.
I don't think there's any movie or story, because the same holds true for the novel, that has made me feel as terrified, as hopeless, or as depressed as On the Beach. Even though the movie ends with a call to action directed towards the real world, there's still hope, there's still time, brother. The feeling of hopelessness is pervasive throughout the movie. I would call it almost sadistic, the way it gives you a little hope for the survival of our characters sort of in the middle of the movie, even playing with your expectations a bit, because it's a Hollywood film. You think our characters would find some way. Surely not all our heroes can die, but it just goes on to completely smash that hope in the cruelest way possible. It was just a Coca-Cola bottle. Maybe there is even something about consumerism in there. I am not sure. Stanley Kramer, the director of the film, is known for making films of strong political and social consciousness about the post-war period. These include The Defiant Ones and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which are about race relations in America. Inherit the Wind, which is about the Scopes monkey trial from the 20s, I believe. And Judgment at Nuremberg, which is obviously about the Nuremberg trials after the Second World War. In other words, he became known as the director who made movies with a message. And On the Beach is no different from that perspective. Though he depicts the end of the world as depressingly inevitable, it aims very much to prevent that, or to try to do whatever he can to prevent that by addressing the people, the contemporary viewers of the film, and perhaps sort of the world leaders at the time that the film was made. On the Beach is a little different from Kramer's usual MO, however. Thinking of movies like The Defiant Ones or Inherit the Wind, his characters tend to be fighters. They're passionate about what they believe, sometimes preachy. But On the Beach, he seems on the Beach, he seems to conform to the style of the novel more than perhaps what he had done up until that point, the novel being written by Nevil Shute, which is extremely reserved in its display of emotions, almost pathologically so.
I'll pick up Jenny's milk on the way home from the station.
Why do you have to pick it up?
Well, they just won't be delivering it anymore, I understand.
Oh. It's a beautiful day, Peter. If I wheel Jennifer down to the club after lunch, could you meet me there for a swim? Peter?
They just decided that yesterday.
Everybody accepts their fates quietly. There is no chaos, no looting, no mad hedonism that you would normally expect in scenarios like that. Instead, everybody just looks defeated, too tired to do anything but patiently wait for the end. The coping mechanism of choice is to abruptly go through the daily routine that everyone has just gone and they know well before the catastrophe, and they might as well just do that after the catastrophe. It feels so dignified that it's almost admirable if you didn't know what caused it and what is about to happen next. We do have the occasional intense displays of emotional instability, like Moira's excessive drinking, Julian Osborne's bellyaching about the state of the world, Mary's pathological denial of the present and near descent into insanity, and to a certain extent that insane Grand Prix with the race car drivers piling up after one another in a series of crashes that would fit right into a Mad Max movie. Captain Towers also exhibits a form of denial, as he often talks about his wife and kids in the present tense, as though they're still waiting for him to come back to the States.
You look married.
Oh, I am. My wife's name is Sharon. I have a couple of kids. Richard, 8. Helen, 5. Dick is the real sailor of the family. He is going to go to Annapolis. Oh, that's to be expected. He'll probably change his mind.
Why is it taking so long? Can you explain it to me?
Perhaps this is less of an active delusion than an emotional or a philosophical one. Dwight knows his family is dead. He doesn't have any real illusions about it, but part of him can't accept that, perhaps sort of an emotional part of it or an existential part of him. He's forever resigned to a life that is pointless without his wife and kids. Time is just passing by until the end comes, and he's somehow reunited with his family, whatever that means. For him, the world has already ended. At the same time, there are scenes in the movie you could watch and almost forget that it's an apocalypse movie. Right from the start, all the sailors and military personnel perform their duties like normal. People adhere to the same norms and customs as they always have. It's hard to say if this is brave or foolish. People go to dinner parties, they go to the beach, they pat each other on the butt, many times apparently.
Right. I'd so much like to see the young folks enjoying themselves.
They complain about the wine and wait for the fishing season to start. It's all about this inexpressible dignity that both the novel and the film insists on giving to these characters until the bitter end, essentially. Despite the grim subject, in many ways, it is a beautiful film. Kramer's camera movement is classic yet dynamic, capturing the emotional depth of the characters. The acting is top-notch from pretty much everyone, with Fred Astaire being a particular favorite of mine, with his role as the regretful British scientist. Not really what he's known for, especially at this time, from what I understand. I'm not so familiar with his filmography. I have not watched many musicals from the 50s and the 40s where he was most active, apparently. And I'm not sure if Fred Astaire, at this point in 1959, had already dabbled with more serious drama roles. I know that he's had some more serious roles after this. I'm not sure if he did before this, but he sure as hell knocked it out of the park with this one. There's one scene in the submarine where he talks about the war, and it is devastating. It paints a picture of someone in deep conflict with himself and who at the same time represents something much bigger than himself. And Fred Astaire is just simply phenomenal in it.
The trouble with you is you want a simple answer, and there isn't any. The war started when people accepted the idiotic principle that peace could be maintained by arranging to defend themselves with weapons they couldn't possibly use. without committing suicide. Everybody had an atomic bomb and counter bombs and counter bombs. The devices outgrew us. We couldn't control them. I know. I helped build them. God help me.
It is interesting to consider how the movie depicts the nuclear apocalypse and what is the political situation that it responded to at the time that it came out. As the Wikipedia article for the novel points out, the author, Nevil Shute, did not know anything about nuclear winter. That was not known until much later, and it simply deals with the radiation of a worldwide nuclear war, with making a few guesses about things that he did not know or that were not well known at the time. While nuclear war would be devastating, most experts agree that it is unlikely it would wipe out the entirety of humanity for a variety of reasons. Of course, there are many variables to consider. It depends on where and how the bombs are distributed, with most targets being in the northern hemisphere. There's a good chance that the southern hemisphere would most likely be okay from the radiation. Maybe we would see an increased rate in cancers after the war, but humanity would survive this war, especially in the southern hemisphere. Of course, that doesn't take into account the possibility of nuclear winter, which is not something that we understand quite well, and we obviously only have simulations of it. But in addition to that, there would also be devastating sociopolitical and economic effects of a nuclear war, which would certainly expand beyond whatever damage the bomb themselves or nuclear fallout would do. Still, the human species is unlikely to go extinct, and generally the further you are from a strategic target, the more likely it is that there will be survivors even in the northern hemisphere. Even then, nuclear war is no laughing matter, and what the film and the novel respond to was this cavalier attitude by certain groups, possibly at the top of all nuclear nation, that they could survive a nuclear war if they just played their cards right. This attitude persisted for a long time. For example, 5 years later, we have Kubrick, who responded to a similar statement with Dr. Strangelove. The same year, Sidney Lumet released Failsafe. There's also, Outer Limits episodes and Twilight Zone episodes about this subject. One that comes to mind is Third from the Sun, which deals with a very, very similar sentiment, an almost fascination, an almost erotic fixation, I would say, with nuclear war, which is portrayed as being inevitable given the attitudes of the time. So the way that On the Beach sort of like treats nuclear war and a certain inevitability of nuclear war was by no means unique at the time. Interestingly, there's one scene where Julian Osborne, played by Fred Astaire again, speculates about how the war started, which nobody really knows in the film.
Somewhere, some poor bloke probably looked at a radar screen and thought he saw something. Knew that if he hesitated 1,000th of a second, his own country would be wiped off the map, so he pushed a button. And the world went crazy.
This is eerily similar, almost identical, in fact, to the real-world case of Stanislav Petrov. Perhaps you've heard of this one. It's a very famous story. Petrov was a Soviet lieutenant who, while on duty at a nuclear early warning facility, received an alarm from the automated computer system that the USA had launched, I believe, 5 nuclear missiles towards the Soviet Union. And the prescribed course of action, the protocol, was to simply inform your superiors, who would then make the decision to launch a retaliatory strike, which would pretty much certainly lead to global-scale nuclear war, and that would be terrible. Petrov, however, took a step back. He evaluated the alarm, and he concluded that the alarm must be a false positive, so he did not take any action. Of course, later investigation proved that he was correct. Of course, there was no missiles that the US had launched. And apparently this is a fairly common thing that happened at the time. Computers malfunctioned and had false positives all the time, although I don't think we know of any example that any other stories that were as dramatic as that of Stanislav Petrov. And it seems the same scenario happened on the beach, but whoever was in charge was not as wise as Petrov and retaliated, and the rest is history. And that's the theory anyway. And it kind of aligns with the fears of how people thought nuclear war might start at the time. One person afraid and alone pushing the big red button. Not that there ever was a red button. People were at least smart enough to know that it shouldn't work like that. But it was a real concern until maybe, I want to say, the 80s. I am not a historian. I'm not sure if we've ever come close to a scenario like that. Maybe the Cuban Missile Crisis. Luckily, nothing came of it. Obviously, we're all alive today, and the world has not gone into a nuclear apocalypse. And thankfully, all we've had to worry about is things like lead poisoning, greenhouse gases, and all kinds of other pollutants that we ingest and inhale every day, but not radiation, and that's important. Obviously, there are many nuclear apocalypse and post-apocalypse movies, too many to count, yet I don't think I've seen one that is quite like this one. With one possible exception, I did recently see a movie that I think would make a great companion for a double feature with On the Beach, and that is Miracle Mile.
Love can sure spin your head around. God, where do you begin?
Well, hello.
We must have been meant to be together. It's too bad you have to work tonight.
Only till midnight.
Fate is a funny thing.
Miracle Mile is a film released in 1989, written and directed by Steve DeJarnott, about a man in his 30s who one night at midnight finds out that there will be an all-out nuclear war before the morning comes, and the whole world is doomed. As this warning slowly materializes over the next few hours, he spends the entire night trying to locate the love of his life, the woman he just had a first date with, because he can't fathom spending the last few hours on Earth any other way. It's a post-apocalyptic romance, and much like On the Beach, things don't end well for anyone. Although things devolve into anarchy and chaos much quicker and to a far greater extent than On the Beach. Still, I can't think of any other movie that would pair so nicely with On the Beach than Miracle Mile, and if you enjoyed one, I strongly recommend the other. Both films share in common the depressing, tragic outcome of nuclear war, yet both have something beautiful and deeply endearing about them. The title of On the Beach is supposedly inspired by a line in T.S. Eliot's Hollow Men. In the last of meeting places, we grope together and avoid speech, gathered on this beach of the Tumut River. I think the comparison with T.S. Eliot is apt because reading T.S. Eliot's poetry invokes the same sentiment in me, this mixture of beauty and sadness that I found so appealing in these movies. I'm not sure exactly what the recipe for this feeling is, maybe because these stories explore how foolish and stupid and sadistic and immature we are as a species, and yet in that big bag of ugliness, there's a kernel of something that makes us and our experiences worth preserving, and we shouldn't be so quick to dismiss it. That's all I had to say for this movie. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing. Hopefully I will see you next time.